Through that alone, the Victory Farm is able to employ 1,000 people directly as permanent and casuals in their farms. But also, through that, they have been able to create 200 outlets that employs another 700 people. If just one investor in that region can be able to put about an economy that employs 1,700, why should we be fighting about abroad jobs when even if you think about people like Rio Fish is the biggest aggregator of fish in Mutembei County, Mr. Speaker, and Rio Fish does only about 300 metric tons. We are talking about a gap of 400,000 metric tons. And Rio Fish can be able to employ further 600 people through their casuals and permanent opportunities in that fish industries. What am I saying here, Mr. Speaker, as I finish? I'm saying that as you go to that grassroots community, Mr. Speaker, let's fetch for those opportunities that can be able to come and legislate in terms of creating job opportunities for our people. And Busia, I believe that if you look at it, it's going to be an eye-opener for the Senate when we go there. Therefore, I support this, and I hope that we will get the resources needed to make sure that senators can spend time in Busia for those 4-5 days we'll be in Busia. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, the same character of people missing in sessions here, Mr. Speaker, I hope that will not extend to people missing in Busia, because that will be a learning opportunity for senators to see and bring back. I second, Mr. Speaker, and I really appreciate the fact that this has been considered and is going to be in our calendar this year. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Karen Nyamu, resume your seat. Senator Gloria, Senator Mutinda, resume your seat. Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that aware that on 11th of July 2024, pursuant to Article 126(1) of the Constitution, the Senate resolved to hold its plenary and committee sittings in Busia County from 23rd to 27th of September 2024. Acknowledging the recommendation of the Senate Business Committee to alter the dates for holding of the sittings in Busia County and the need to put in place the necessary measures for successful sittings, now therefore the Senate resolves to alter the dates for the Senate Mashinani in Busia County from 23rd to 27th September 2024 to 28th October to 1st of November 2024. Honorable Senators, considering that this particular motion is similar to the earlier motion, I will only allow from those who order members. There are members who requested in earlier debate to speak to this motion. I will allow only 2 members and under 2 minutes each to contribute to this motion. And Senator John Kinyua.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kunipa fursa hii. Nasimama kuunga mkono kubadilisha kwa tarehe ya kuwa na kikao katika kaunti ya Busia, Bwana Spika. Bwana Spika, inapatia seneti fursa ya kutembelea mashinani na kupata kuchangamkia mambo ambayo inawahusu wale watu katika ile kaunti, Bwana Spika. Haijapotea kwangu, Bwana Spika, seneti hii imetembea katika kaunti nyingi, tukianzia tumetembea kaunti ya Kitui ambapo Bwana Spika tuliona ya kwamba wakati yule gavana alikuwa ameanzisha kiwanda cha kutengeneza nguo. Bwana Spika, tulienda mahali kunaitwa Wasingishu. Bwana Spika, Wasingishu tuliona wakulima wakati yule walikuwa wamejawa na ghadhabu wakisema ya kwamba wanataka bei yao ya mahindi iweze kuangaliwa. Bwana Spika, tukaambiwa tuzungumze mahindi. Bwana Spika, nakumbuka Mheshimiwa Murkomen aliambiwa, Murkomen, wacha Kiingereza, una Kiingereza kizuri, leo ongea mahindi. Bwana Spika, tukienda mashinani tunaweza kupata haya mambo moja kwa moja kutoka kwa wananchi. Vile vile tuliweza kutembelea hospitali ya Moi ya Referral Hospital, Bwana Spika, na vile vile Bwana Spika pale tuliweza kuona shida zinazo wakumu. Bwana Spika, tulitembelea hivi juzi tumekuwa katika kaunti ya Turkana, Bwana Spika, tukaona vile ambavyo mambo ya stima inavyofanywa pale, Bwana Spika, tukiwa katika kamati. Vile vile Bwana Spika, maswali mengi yaliweza kuibuka. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, hii inapatia vikao katika gatuzi zetu, inapatia seneti fursa ya kuweza kuungana na wananchi, kuweza kuulizwa moja kwa moja maswali na wananchi, na vile vile kuona mambo yanavyotendeka pale mashinani kwenyewe, kwa Bwana Spika, kwa sababu shughuli yetu kubwa kama seneti ni kuangalia mambo pale mashinani. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, mimi naunga mkono kubadilisha kwa tarehe, hata japokuwa nilikuwa nimejipanga vizuri kwa zile tarehe ambazo zilikuwa zimewekwa, lakini mzungu anasema mtu asiye ni mtu pumbavu tu peke yake asiyebadilisha mawazo, Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, naunga mkono na nasema tena asanti kwa kunipa fursa hii. Asante.
Asante sana Senator Kinyua. Senator William Kisang.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also rise to support this motion to postpone Senate Mashinani to Busia from next week, Monday to 28th of October, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, we know the constraints, we know the challenges that we are facing. I believe that's the reason why, in its own wisdom, the House Senate Business Committee decided that we reschedule by 5 weeks. Honorable Speaker, I know majority of the members, including what Senator Fernando Jerarge had said, they had made arrangements and even booked where they are going to put up, Honorable Speaker. But I believe the facilities will allow them to utilize in the new dates, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also wanted to inform my members that the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, Honorable Speaker, has done very well, and members, they need to follow. There are many opportunities of employment that has been created, Honorable Speaker. For the last almost close to a week, the Kenya Kwanza government has put in the papers for people to see opportunities that have been created. In the housing alone, affordable housing alone, Honorable Speaker, the government has created over 112,000 job opportunities, Honorable Speaker. While we were in Turkana last year for Senate Mashinani, Honorable Speaker, we were able to launch as ICT committee apps, free Wi-Fi in 2 markets, Honorable Speaker, and that one has created opportunities for the youth to do online opportunities, to do online jobs, Honorable Speaker. And we also had another opportunity to go and check like Turkana wind power in Longayalani, Honorable Speaker. Those are the experiences that we get by going for Senate Mashinani, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there are these industrial parks that are being put up at the counties. And these are also opportunities that the Kenya Kwanza government has enabled the counties to generate additional opportunities, Honorable Speaker. It is important, even if you are in the position of the minority, Honorable Speaker, they need to talk about the positives that have been done, that are there, despite the challenges that we are going through, Honorable Speaker. We need to give credit where it is due, Honorable Speaker. Our constituencies, Honorable Speaker, they are going to have every ward in the 290 constituencies will have innovation hubs. And these innovation hubs, Honorable Speaker, will also create opportunities for the youth. Apart from having a center manager, 290 center managers in the innovation hubs, Honorable Speaker, it will also give the youth, the GNCs, opportunity to access free internet. And this free internet, they'll be able to do research, they'll be able to do, Honorable Speaker, online opportunities, even at night, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I support that we push forward so that we prepare ourselves, Honorable Speaker. But what is also very important is for the leadership of the House to ensure the business that has been generated for this particular third session is completed within this particular time, so that when we go for the long recess in December, Honorable Speaker, we come back next year on a clean slate and start on new opportunities, Honorable Speaker. I know the majority that said most members are not in the afternoon. I think also it's important to let the majority leader know that our other job is representation. So we go to also offices to look for opportunities for our electorate, Honorable Speaker. That's why once in a while people are not in the House, because they also do the other part of the job that we are given by the electorate. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support.
Honorable members, pass one to the directives I earlier on gave. I close debate on that particular motion and call upon the mover, the majority leader, to reply.
Mr. Speaker, I thank members who have taken time to speak to this very important motion. I hope we can garner the support of the requisite number of colleagues, Mr. Speaker, so that we are in Busia in the month of November and get to learn, interact, deliver a Senate machinani to the people of Busia that is far much better than what the other 3 Senate machinani episodes actually did offer, Mr. Speaker. It is my sincere hope, Mr. Speaker, that at that particular time, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans will appreciate more the work of the Senate, unlike previously in the past, Mr. Speaker, where we've had different varying experiences, Mr. Speaker, and get to see real time, Mr. Speaker. When Senator Kinyo was speaking, Mr. Speaker, he mentioned something that pricked my curiosity. When we were in Kitui, we visited the Kitui, I can't remember the exact name, and I wish Senator Wambua was here to remind me, Kikotek. I'd wish to know how it's doing in this particular day and age. Because, Mr. Speaker, remember, right now, the national government is moving to offload its involvement in business, and hence the conversation of privatization in the sugar mills and so many other institutions where government has interest. I am seeing an emerging trend where governors, out of perhaps, I don't know, informed by what scientific evidence, Mr. Speaker, or what project viability proposals, Mr. Speaker, are setting up industries to be run and managed by county governments. If the national government is struggling, Mr. Speaker, to manage many of the industries, tell me how good our counties will be to manage many of these, Mr. Speaker. And I just thought of that particular industry, and I see many county governments, Mr. Speaker, are putting up this or the other industry. And it will be a good study, and perhaps you can be informed later on. If there are any industries that have been set up by the county government of Busia, it will be good, Mr. Speaker, to not only just visit the factory, but also assess their books and see how profitable they are, what is the sustainability plan, that institution, what are the governance issues that have arisen so far, Mr. Speaker, as part of our campaign to entrench devolution in this land. With those very many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply. Thank you.
Honorable members, I make a determination that pursuant to Standing Order 84.1, the matter does not affect counties, and similarly make and ascertain that we have the requisite quorum on this particular motion. I therefore, honorable members, put the question that aware that on the 11th of July 2024, pursuant to Article 126, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution, the Senate resolved to hold its plenary and committee sittings in Busia County from 23rd to 27th of September 2024, acknowledging the recommendation of the Senate Business Committee to alter the dates for holding of the sittings in Busia County and the need to put in place the necessary measures for successful sittings. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves to alter the dates for the Senate Machinani in Busia County from 23rd to 27th of September 2024 to 28th October to 1st of November 2024. Honorable members, will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Now, honorable members, would like to rearrange the order paper, and I defer order numbers from 12 to 27. Order 12 to order 27, I hereby defer and rearrange so that we call order 29. Order 29. Clerk. Senator Please approach the chair.
Order number 29, the National Disaster Management Bill, National Assembly Bills number 24 of 2023, second reading.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the National Disaster Risk Management Bill, National Assembly Bill number 24 of 2023, be now read a second time. Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that this bill is coming to this House. In 2014, or I think it was 2015, Mr. Speaker, when we had the Westgate attack, it was mooted the idea to have an agency that coordinates our disaster response. Because reading afterwards of that disaster, Mr. Speaker, it was said that the first responders actually spent quite a substantial amount of time arguing on basic protocols, Mr. Speaker, on how to respond, Mr. Speaker, to disasters such as those and so many others, Mr. Speaker, where there was argument on who should do what, which commander cannot take orders from the other, and many such things, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the idea to actually have an institution that coordinates our disaster risk management, Mr. Speaker, was mooted. And it's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, that has taken this long. I see now this is actually introduced as a National Assembly bill. And because Senate many times is magnanimous and rises beyond petty institutional ego wars, Mr. Speaker, we proceed to consider this particular bill, despite the fact that I know for a fact, and Senator Moses Kajwang will bear me witness, that the initial drafters of this bill actually is the Senate of the Republic of Kenya through members of this House. Mr. Speaker, this bill, as presently presented to this House, was actually first read, published actually rather, that's the title I was looking for, in the Kenya Gazette supplement number 80 of 2023, in the 31st of May 2023, and read the first time here in the Senate on the 3rd of July 2024. As I have pointed out, Mr. Speaker, that the principal object of this bill is to provide a legal framework for the coordination of disaster risk management activities in both levels of government. And it's important to point out, Mr. Speaker, that this has actually evolved, because at that particular time, and if you follow through many legislations, Mr. Speaker, if you're a keen follower of our legislative processes, Mr. Speaker, you know that even in that particular time, despite the fact that we're in the devolution cycle, we didn't do legislations, Mr. Speaker, with county governments in mind. I want to appreciate the improvement that has come of late, Mr. Speaker, where when you replicate or when you do a body at the national level, you try, much as there is still a lot more to be done, Mr. Speaker, and replicate a similar institution at the county level, Madam Speaker. The only concern, and I agree many times, Mr. Speaker, I know I am the mover of this bill, and therefore I move the bill as is and leave it to the House to inform the second stage and the third and the final stage on how to amend and perhaps make the bill better, because a good idea can always give a way to a better idea, Mr. Speaker. But I must put a disclaimer, Mr. Speaker, that I have insisted, and I have said this to all authorities, including to the highest office of the land, Mr. Speaker, that I am not comfortable at all with the creation of any new agency in this country, Mr. Speaker. That we have sufficient agencies to do all or anything that arises. Therefore, if there is thinking, Mr. Speaker, that a certain new agency needs to be brought on board, like now this particular National Disaster Risk Management Agency, Mr. Speaker, then such legislations must be accompanied by transition clauses of which other institutions we are folding up. Otherwise, if we continue with this practice, Mr. Speaker, to the best of my count, we have more than 350 state agencies, Mr. Speaker. And you wonder doing what? We have county governments, we have ministries, we have state departments, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I want to challenge the committee actually that is considering this legislation to particularly point out and establish many of these institutions that we are trying to help them coordinate and come together, Mr. Speaker, on the transitional amendments that shall come out of this bill, Mr. Speaker, we need to wound up those institutions so that even the staff actually can be part and parcel of this institution. Because, Mr. Speaker, we keep on talking about the wage bill, the struggles that we were talking about a few minutes ago, why we are not creating jobs locally, Mr. Speaker, is because it is extremely expensive to run government of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. And part of the reason that makes it expensive to run government, Mr. Speaker, is because of recurrent expenditure. We are employing too few people, Mr. Speaker, at the expense of millions others, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I hope actually that when our committees retire to bring a report to this House on this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, they will be guiding the House towards the merger, Mr. Speaker, of different agencies. I know there are different agencies that respond actually to the various disasters actually. National drought, I don't know which one, and this and the other, Mr. Speaker. We must, if we are creating an agency, Mr. Speaker, then all those institutions must be folded up, Mr. Speaker, and come into this one institution that responds to disasters, Mr. Speaker. The bill further seeks to establish the county disaster risk management committees in each of our counties, as a role of disaster risk management is a shared function between the national and county government under the 4th schedule of our constitution, Mr. Speaker. And that is a fact, Mr. Speaker, because there are certain disasters that actually occur at the county levels, which our county governments have ability to assess the risk, Mr. Speaker, and mitigate. The main premise of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to approach disaster risk management in a manner that seeks to respond to effectively in a timely manner to any disaster or risk of disaster, and to prevent the adverse effects of disaster recovery as far as possible, and the livelihood of the communities, Mr. Speaker, that are affected actually by these disasters, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Madam Speaker, the establishment of a comprehensive framework will outline actually the strategies for how to mitigate, how to prepare, Mr. Speaker, how to respond, recovery, that will better protect our citizens and infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. We risk leaving actually people will represent in this House, Mr. Speaker, to the devastating impacts of disaster. Therefore, it is imperative that we prioritize the passage of this bill, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, to safeguard the well-being of our country and the people that we represent in this House, Mr. Speaker. Part 1 of the bill is all about preliminary provisions, Madam Speaker, of the name, the title, the object of the act. Part 2 of the bill, Madam Speaker, establishes actually the institutional framework on disaster risk management, which includes National Disaster Risk Management Authority, the authority that I've spoken into, Mr. Speaker, and I've said, I expect, Madam Speaker, that before the final passage of this bill, that we must include transitional clause, just like we did for SHIF, Madam Speaker, and transiting NHIF. I am very clear in my mind, Madam Speaker, that this country does not need any new agency, any new institution. We can only make better that which we have. And therefore, if we are creating a new authority, Madam Speaker, it is on the understanding and the premise that there are other institutions that we are actually either winding up completely or transitioning its people, its operations into the new agency, so that you don't end up with a continuous recurring bill, Madam Speaker, of close to 1 trillion Kenya shillings, Madam Speaker, just paying a few government workers, Mr. Speaker, while millions others continue to languish in poverty for lack of opportunity because we are not able to manage, Madam Speaker. We must make government lean and efficient. And part of making it lean and efficient, Madam Speaker, is to look keenly actually and read through. And in fact, I wish the members of the National Cohesion Committee, Mr. Speaker, were part and parcel of us. Actually, we said it in the bipartisan motion that we passed here when we had the challenges that we had in June. And I hope, Madam Speaker, like somebody observed this afternoon, you know, we had given actually our committees 30 days to look into the resolutions that were into that bipartisan motion. I hope our committee chairpersons can soon start to pass or give us actually resolutions of how far they are in implementing the resolutions that this House had passed at that particular time. It will be a waste of the country's emotion, the country's time, Madam Speaker, having spent the time that we spent here, speaking so candidly to each other, to only let them lie in the hands of Madam Speaker. I expect, Madam Speaker, that each of our chairpersons that we tasked with the various responsibilities will begin reporting back to the Senate on the actions that they have taken as directed by that particular motion, when we spoke here in the month of June, Madam Speaker. I was speaking to part 2, Madam Speaker. Part 3 of the bill contains provisions on dealing with the manner in which disasters may be classified and establishment of the disaster electric information system, ways in which you are able to detect actually disaster, Madam Speaker, and the risk that is available. Technology is available worldwide, Madam Speaker, including here in Kenya, on ways in which you can point out and, you know, signal people way ahead of time, Madam Speaker. The people that were victims of floods here in the month of April, Madam Speaker, if we had such detection mechanisms, Madam Speaker, we would have sent the early warning systems out to detect, Madam Speaker, and inform people to either move away from the causes of those floods, Madam Speaker, and therefore saving life. Part 5, Madam Speaker, contains the provisions on institutional framework at the county level. And I said this is particularly important, and I'm happy about this, Madam Speaker, because it speaks to the growth of the Senate as a legislature in terms of, and even the office actually, of the drafters of this legislation, Madam Speaker, that there is an appreciation in the country, Madam Speaker, that there are 2 levels of government. This was a rare occurrence, Madam Speaker, in the 2013 to 2017 Senate. Many times we'd pass legislation and leave it to fight. Our understanding then and appreciation of devolution was that you either do a silo law for the national government and one for county government, Madam Speaker. But this interdependence and coordination, Madam Speaker, of actually the 2 levels of government, Madam Speaker, is a welcome improvement. Therefore, Part 4 speak to that particular issue of setting up of this institution actually at the county level, where you're setting up what is being referred to as the risk management committees to act as a focal point for coordination of disaster risk management activities at the county level and give information either to the national office or to the county governor's office, Madam Speaker, for mitigation of risk, Madam Speaker, and response to disaster. Part 5 contains the financial provisions, which include the funds of the authority, financial year, annual estimates, as well as accounts and audit of the authority. And this is where I disagree greatly with our colleagues in the National Assembly, Madam Speaker, with tremendous respect to them. They are the house that actually handles the budget. They know the fiscal difficulties that this country continues to exercise. Yet, they send to this house a bill that creates an extra authority without deference to what do you do with other institutions that are already doing work that is similar to this. I expect a house that interacts with the budget of the Republic of Kenya, appreciating the difficulty and the challenges that we are in presently as a country, Madam Speaker, to at least have accompanied, because, you know, Madam Speaker, finances are not infinite. These are resources that are scarce. If you're putting finances to a particular place, then it follows naturally that another place must lose. It is this idea that resources are infinite. There's a lack of appreciation, and I'm sorry to say this, on the part of our colleagues in the National Assembly, to know that there is a limit to which you can create authorities and continue to charge the exchequer, Madam Speaker, without actually putting a strain to the economy of this republic. I expect them, Madam Speaker, that anytime you propose an authority, unless there is no other authority or state agency, Madam Speaker, including a ministry that speaks or addresses matters that are being proposed in that agency, Madam Speaker, to remove, because it's an addition on one side and a subtraction on the other, Madam Speaker, because these are resources that are scarce, and therefore I expect a lot of work to be done on Part 5 of the bill by members of our committee. Part 6, Madam Speaker, as I draw to a close, contains miscellaneous provisions on the protection of information held by the authority and county committees. These also create offenses and prescribes penalties thereto. You know, Madam Speaker, I have seen, for example, when the national government has issued directives. You remember that here in Nairobi, where Senator Sifuna represents, there are many people that died along the banks of Nairobi River when it banks. When the government issued directive the other day and said that we need to move people who are living within the riverbanks, you find some third-grade politicians, Mr. Speaker, some occupying very high offices in this country, Mr. Speaker, reducing it to be an issue about tribe. How tragic can it be, Mr. Speaker? I don't think that the people that died in the month of April belong to any particular tribe. Those are Kenyans, and we expect that any responsible leader will expect to guide those people and tell them that you're endangering your lives. Let government provide alternative places for those people to live. Those are the offenses that are being referred to in this particular bill after identifying the risk, because it is also, Madam Speaker, dangerous for you to be informed that there's a risk here, don't occupy this particular part, and you continue to defy, Madam Speaker. We must provide sanctions to Kenyans who want to continue to do such things, or even institutions, you know, Madam Speaker, that continues to endanger the lives of people. Madam Speaker, it is only in Nairobi and in this country where you find actually a government agency or a government department, they go ahead and dig a huge trench in a part of the road where citizens are used to passing with no warnings, and they leave for the night. In the course of the night, when people are walking, people are jogging, Madam Speaker, people fall into that particular ditch. Some even die, you know, get accidents, Madam Speaker. Yet there are no sanctions against such institutions. That's part of the risk occurrences, Madam Speaker, that we need to point out, so that any agency that causes harm to people by creating a risk and not providing the proper mechanism through which you ensure that you don't put the lives of others at risk while undergoing either repairs or creating something, Madam Speaker, we need to sanction such institutions, Madam Speaker. And that is part of what is being provided in Part 6. Part 7, Madam Speaker, contains the provisions of delegated powers. In terms of these powers, the CS responsible for matters responsible of disaster risk management may, in consultation with the Council of Governors, make regulations generally for the better carrying effect of the provisions of this Act, Madam Speaker. As I conclude, I wish to state that this is a very important bill, and therefore I urge honorable senators to read, internalize, and improve on this particular bill, Madam Speaker, so that we can conclude on it and ensure that our citizens actually live in a safer country. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and request the Majority Whip, Senator Boni Halwale, to second.
Senator Halwale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second the leader of the majority, having ably moved this motion, and I do so as moved. Madam Speaker, I'm doing this not as an opportunity to express my personal thinking of whether this legislation is good or bad, but because we have a constitutional mandate to ensure that a bill which has come from the National Assembly as a message, we must deal with it. I therefore second, and I want to put all my hopes not only in the debate in this House, but on the proceedings that will take place in the committee when deliberating on this, because, Madam Speaker, creating yet another authority will come with expense. I have gone through. It is creating boards. All boards come with expenses. They are put their chairs. They are put their director generals. They are put their members of the board who will all be deserving payment. A responsibility which, in my view, Madam Speaker, can be taken by the ministry, the departments, and agencies responsible for disaster management. Madam Speaker, I say this with due respect, because I know that today you might be sitting pretty, next week, next month, even up to the whole year, and nothing happens. But when it strikes, it can be extremely devastating. I therefore feel and think and believe that we should streamline the running of the agencies, the departments responsible for disaster management, because it is not something that will happen on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-week basis, so that the disaster management preparedness can be there in the ministry, but not in an authority. All these people now, they'll be reporting on duty 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, week to week, month per month, doing what? We can put our resources to better use. But because we have a committee that will sit on this matter, maybe for the first time, it should be the decision of this Senate that we have completely disagreed with the need of establishing an authority for this purpose, disagree with the National Assembly, and then the mediation committee will eventually come together and say that let's streamline the way government does its work without necessarily putting together another authority. Madam Speaker, having said that, I hope that the committee will see how flawed it is that counties that are the seat or the home of disasters have been allowed, for example, in this bill, to have only one person representing the interests of the 47 counties on the board. If we have recognized that disasters take place in counties, then we must allow counties to have proper representation. If then there will be need for this authority to be in place. Having made those reservations clear, Madam Speaker, I conclude by seconding the motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that the National Disaster Management Bill, National Assembly Bills number 24 of 2023, be now read a second time. I have Senator Okech. Eddie.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to also chime into this bill and actually a proposal to create yet another body to look at our national disaster management issues. I am persuaded that in the spirit of what the Senator of Kakamega has presented, which is we want to avoid as much as possible any tussle or any lack of collaboration with the National Assembly in the bills that come from National Assembly, and therefore sometimes it's important to support some of these bills. But Madam Speaker, I really appreciate the thought process that the Senator of Kakamega has expressed himself on this bill. Because, Madam Speaker, disaster is not something that you can put an omnibus bill on. Disaster by nature and by design occurs at different levels, Madam Speaker. We have got natural disasters, if you like, you can call them vagaries of nature, and we have got human-made disasters, Madam Speaker. All these disasters that we see having in this country, Madam Speaker, have got their own specific causative factors and therefore their own specific response mechanism. In fact, in some cases, even preparedness that they must have. Creating another body to actually come and cluster, take each cluster and then put all of them together under one body, Madam Speaker, will do a disservice to how, as a country, we approach disaster readiness and response in this country. Madam Speaker, let's take, for example, drought in this country. The strategy for dealing with drought in the country cannot be given to one authority to be able to figure it out. It's just very simple as such. Because you will need a scientific approach to that particular disaster on drought, including sometimes a place whereby you need to predict and advise farmers on, for instance, should you be able to change your season for planting. should you be able to change the kind of seeds you're going to plant? And in some cases, if we have got drought that has affected us to the extent that needs us to look for opportunities for getting seed or getting other resilient seeds from abroad, or even getting food to intervene for those who have gone without food, then it will mean that naturally a drought-resistant agency should be in place to respond to that particular drought problem. If you look at fire, for instance, Madam Speaker, how would a fire disaster that we keep on seeing mushrooming everywhere in a place like Nairobi depend functionally on an authority nationally to be able to respond to it properly? Madam Speaker, I have seen the governor of Nairobi struggle even to identify the causative factors that are causing fire in Nairobi, that are causing a lot of havoc, health hazards, and even wastage of property in the county of Nairobi, Madam Speaker. To the extent that for you to scientifically be able to deal with fire disasters that we are seeing in Nairobi, perhaps it's not the same way you're going to deal with the fire that is happening in Migori County, which could be an issue of forest fires that are caused by charcoal burners. This cannot be vested in an authority, Madam Speaker. And even to be very, very disappointed with this bill, if you want to classify terrorism as a human-caused disaster, and then you give it to this particular authority, Madam Speaker, to deal with issues of counterterrorism, and to figure out the nuance of dealing with terrorism, which is an issue that should be dealt with in the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of Defense, so that you can be able to deal with it awesomely. How do you vest this in an authority called National Disaster Management Authority, Madam Speaker? It defeats my understanding. My proposal, Madam Speaker, would be, we have got Ministry of Special Programs. That ministry must then be able to classify all departmental agencies that can deal with specific clusters of disaster that we are experiencing in this country, and be able to devise prompt and most modern ways of engaging with those specific clusters of disasters that happen within our borders, to the extent that we can have a cutthroat strategy operationally to be able to respond to disasters in this country, Madam Speaker. We saw when floods came about, people were running helter-skelter because there was this notion that you feel like if floods are happening in the country, then the order of response must come from the presidency and come down and trickle down to all members of the county assembly and then to the governors, to the extent that we saw some of the worst responses to serious issues of flood in this country. If they were left to ministerial departments and to some extent to a number of counties to be able to devise their own ways of dealing with disasters that come in their own area, Madam Speaker, I believe that we could be able to have a very proper response and apt operation to be able to not only deal with a response mechanism to some of these issues, but even recovery, Madam Speaker. You would understand that when disasters happen in this country, Madam Speaker, you will see the political notion of responding to them immediately with some kind of bravado and some kind of PR mechanisms, to the extent that within that 1 week that a disaster happens, everybody is active. The president is active, governors are active, every politician is active, everybody is talking about it, corporations are active, raising money to respond. But then, Madam Speaker, what happens to true recovery of people who have been faced with those disasters, Madam Speaker? Can we be able to speak authoritatively to the fact that those who are affected by the floods in Tana River, Madam Speaker, during these huge floods, their lives are better because of response that we had in this country? Can we be able to speak authoritatively that families that were affected by serious floods in Nyatike constituency in Migori County, where I come from, Madam Speaker, in Kabuto, in places like Luanda, where I come from, Madam Speaker, just because the government responded with issues of giving them some donations in terms of food, blankets, and a few things here and there solve their problems of the impact of those floods, Madam Speaker? Can we be able to say authoritatively that from floods that we faced in Budalangi, Madam Speaker, and we keep on facing those floods year in, year out, because of simple national response that we have collectively, by giving people response mechanism and response charitable goods like food and blankets, their lives are better, Madam Speaker? No, they are not. Those people are still suffering, and some of them don't even have shelter because there was no response connected to recovery to these people. There are people in Mathare, Madam Speaker, there are people in Mukuru kwa Jenga, there are people in Mavoko who are still facing serious impact of floods that we had. Why is that so? Because we ended up centralizing the notion of disaster response, so that it's a response to help you eat today but not know how you survive tomorrow. For you to survive tomorrow, there has to be a proper recovery plan, Madam Speaker. And that recovery plan can only happen if you avoid putting all these clusters of disasters in this country under one omnibus authority that then is supposed to respond to it. Therefore, Madam Speaker, this bill is really a dangerous bill because apart from just wasting taxpayers' money and being able to put people and creating for them jobs, Madam Speaker, this bill will be the one big hindrance that will be able to make sure that we never properly prepare and respond to disaster in this country. I'm disappointed, Madam Speaker, that in this bill, there is even proposals that that authority can run as a corporation. Basically, you are saying that this authority should actually be registered as a corporation under the register of companies. Because when you start arguing that this, under section 2 of this bill, you start arguing that this authority will have the powers to own property, both movable and unmovable, to open bank accounts, to start borrowing, to also do lending. You are creating a corporation in this country, Madam Speaker, to deal with the disaster. How else can I speak about disaster without thinking about this commercialization of people who are going to suffer in this disaster, Madam Speaker? Because if you're proposing that you want to run a corporation that will deal with this disaster of whichever kind in the country, Madam Speaker, then what you're doing, Madam Speaker, is that you're basically creating a corporation that is supposed to mortgage our suffering as a people of Kenya during disaster and make any money from it. I wish that we could do a proper response to disaster by being able to make sure that we pass regulations that can be able to empower different agencies that are dealing with different clusters of disasters in their own way. And Madam Speaker, as I conclude, in this house, and I did promise, time without number, I've said that any bill that seeks to centralize any operation on basic needs of Kenyans, because disasters, most of the time when they happen, they do touch on serious basic needs. And any bill that seeks to centralize that, if you look at part 4 of this bill, Madam Speaker, that talks about counties being given some committees that are only responsive to this larger authority that has got a serious board, and there is no coherence in terms of how that function arms, in terms of how those counties get funded and financed. Yet the national authority, you are giving the power to be able to borrow, to be able to lend, to be able to own assets, to be able to get its own independent budget, and you are denying counties that. That is something I will never support. Because when those disasters happen, Madam Speaker, they do happen in Migori County, they do happen in Kakamega County, and the point of call, Madam Speaker, starts with the MCAs, people who are with the people on the ground, Madam Speaker, to the extent that when anything happens, when a fire happens in Nairobi County, or happens in Kuria, where I come from, Madam Speaker, the first person that the people will call there is the MCAs. And then the MCAs will look for the MP. And the MP will look for the governor and the women rep. The local leadership will coalesce around responding to this problem. The moment you deny them the functional capacity in terms of resources, to think about how they respond to this properly, Madam Speaker, then it becomes a problem. Let's rethink how we want to deal with the disaster issues at the county level, how we want to house the functions of dealing with disasters at the county level, to the extent that, Madam Speaker, we will be happy to see counties being self-reliant, self-sufficient, with incredible capacity to deal with any kind of fast natural disaster that they experience. Because the truth is, when these natural disasters happen, sometimes, and actually in most cases, they don't happen in an equation whereby they affect the entire nation. For instance, when you look at the issue of floods, yes, it was a national conversation, but the impact was felt at very specific counties. And I've counted a number of counties that did experience these floods to unimaginable levels. Tana River experienced crazy floods. But that was not true, perhaps, to other counties. Migori County experienced incredible floods. Nairobi experienced incredible impact of floods. Busia County experienced incredible effects of those floods. But not maybe to the same extent that Vihiga experienced, or maybe to the same extent that Kakamega experienced. If you put an omnibus institution that then wants to deal with disaster at that national level, what then happens to immediate response and sustainable response to those disasters when they occur in those particular communities? This is one area that, Madam Speaker, should actually embrace the spirit of devolution. And the spirit of devolution is that when there are resources, when there are strategies to operationalize preparedness, to operationalize response, to operationalize recovery mechanism in terms of disaster, that is something that must be absolutely decentralized, absolutely devolved to the grassroots levels, Madam Speaker. Therefore, I appreciate the spirit of this bill. I appreciate the attempt to be able to actually put in place a way of responding to disasters. But, Madam Speaker, functionally, this bill should not see the light of day because it's just going to create more jobs that are going to cost taxpayers money, and should not see the light of day because it's going to centralize a critical agency that is supposed to be devolved. And more importantly, Madam Speaker, it is going to form a canopy against a number of cluster organizations that deal with specific areas of disaster response, like drought, like fire, like terrorism, and others that need to have independent agencies that can be able to deal with them. I do appreciate the fact that it is in the Senate, but I want to urge the members of the Senate that let us rethink such bills that perhaps are going to centralize very important functions. And therefore, Madam Speaker, with a lot of humility, a lot of respect, a lot of appreciation of the work that has gone here, I don't support this bill. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Sifuna.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to give my views on the bill, Honorable Speaker, and I have identified what I consider positives in the bill and those that, in all honesty, I have problems with. I will not take the path that has been taken by the Senator for Migori to wholesale condemn the bill, because in my view there are some good provisions. Honorable Speaker, let me start with the things that I consider positives. If you look at Section 4 of the proposed bill, Honorable Speaker, they are what they set out and call guiding principles of disaster risk management. There's something they called an all-hazards approach to disaster management. Honorable Speaker, we have had disasters here in Nairobi. And if people hear that there has been a fire, say in a market, or as the one that happened recently in Mukuru Kwanjenga, everybody's mind is tuned to treating burn victims. And they forget that these people's houses have been affected. They have no places to sleep. There's children who are going to school who have no places to sleep. Books have been destroyed. Clothes have been destroyed. Personal property and other effects have been destroyed. So I'm hoping that if this is going to be the guiding principle to disaster management, we must identify all hazards that go or result from a disaster.
Then the next one I like under subsection 2 is enhancing the capacity of the local communities as a front line to disaster risk management. Honorable Speaker, many speakers here contributed, have given examples of the disasters that have happened in Nairobi. In fact, Honorable Speaker, if you take the example of the floods that we experienced, if you speak to the people who are living in those structures along the rivers, there is no person who just puts themselves at risk voluntarily. They have been forced into some of these risky accommodations because of their financial standing, Honorable Speaker. You will find that the accommodations that have been offered closer to the river, on top of bridges and all the other, unsafe areas, are actually cheaper. If you ask for the rental prices of those accommodations, they are cheaper than, the others. And if you speak to the community there, Honorable Speaker, they will tell you that if you have conversations within the community and they are told this is not an area you should be occupying, many of them are willing to cooperate, Honorable Speaker. And if you enhance the capacity of the local communities there and train them, as is proposed in the bill, as frontline actors in disaster risk management, I think it would be something that is positive, because we should be looking more at the preventive side other than being reactionary and coming down to offer assistance when the disaster has happened. Then there is a third one of transparency and accountability. Honorable Speaker, after the floods that we experienced here in Nairobi, many homes were affected, especially in Mathare and Ruaraka. One of the things that we have continued to say as a leadership in Nairobi is that there was no transparency. There was no transparency, Madam Speaker, on how even government response was coordinated. There was no transparency in what was required of the community to do. If you speak to the Member of Parliament for Ruaraka, the Honorable TJ Kajwang, he is still livid, Honorable Speaker, because initially the communication that came from government was that they were going to demolish structures up to 30 meters away from the high water line. And how that moved to 50 meters and then to 60 meters, and then structures are being demolished way beyond what we had been told is the area that would be affected, is something that nobody gives us an answer. And this is what we're saying. We would like that there be transparency and accountability in disaster management and approach to disaster risk management, Honorable Speaker. Then there is the question of the protection of the vulnerable. And I like this as a guiding principle, especially the old, the disabled, the women and the children in these areas must be treated very specially. Then, of course, Honorable Speaker, number 5, it says supporting, under subsection 5, support of the national governments and the county governments, including the local communities in disaster risk management. If you look at the 4th schedule of the Constitution, Honorable Speaker, this is one of those functions that is co-shared. If you look at function number 24, disaster management is listed as a national government function. Under function 12 of the county governments, firefighting and disaster management is a function of the county governments. So that support, Honorable Speaker, is critical. And I will discuss some of these, the challenges and between, when it comes to the support from national government to county governments, Honorable Speaker, and we're hoping that there would be greater synergy in making sure that these disasters are managed in a prudent way. Honorable Speaker, the next thing that I consider positive in this proposed bill is found under section 48, where we are introducing a fine for people who make false claims, who claim that they are victims and they are not victims, because we have seen this specter even here in Nairobi. Our communities there, the Nyumba Kumis and the chiefs and the local administration have tried their best, Honorable Speaker, but there is this specter here in Nairobi, because the problems of the people are so entrenched and they are bigger than what is actually put out there, Honorable Speaker, so that if somebody even who was living in another constituency separate from where it happened, say Mradi fire, if you call a meeting at the chief's office there saying, oh, everybody affected by the Mradi fire should come there for assistance, you find people who are not even living in Mradi also showing up. And sometimes you don't blame them, because they know at least when they go to those centers, there will be something to take home, there will be food. But at the end of the day, we want now people to know that it is going to be a criminal offense for you to make false claims. If you are not a victim, you have not been affected, please allow those who have been affected to be helped without you coming to, reduce even the share of the help that is supposed to get to the victim. So there's a proposal to have a 1 million shilling fine for false claims, or a 1-year jail term, or both for people who make false claims. And we must address the broader question of the state of our people, Honorable Chair, because as I've said, it is not always the intention of people to make these false claims, but they find themselves having to do it in order to survive. Another one, Honorable Speaker, and this is the last positive that I have seen, is under Section 50, the bill proposes a 10 million shilling fine or a 10-year jail term for people who misappropriate relief food and relief equipment. Because this is another problem, Honorable Speaker. The people in possession of relief food and those who have been given even the equipment to be able to help. You find people selling relief food on the market. You find people selling mosquito nets and mattresses and other things that have been meant for the people. And I want to thank the Senator for Migori here, because at the ODM party, he is our disaster manager. And he has done a fantastic job. There have been no complaints. In fact, he has done a good job. Even the Red Cross is jealous of the work that has been done by Senator for Migori. So the people who misappropriate, and there have been no complaints. As SG, I am here to assure the House that I have not had any complaints as regards the job that was done by Senator Eddy during the disaster response by ODM. But those few who want to take away what has been donated by Kenyans in good faith to be able to help their fellow countrymen, now they will face a jail term of 10 years or a fine of 10 million or both. Now, Honorable Speaker, if you allow me, I will touch very quickly on the things that I consider negatives. The first negative, Honorable Speaker, has been touched on by the people who've spoken before me, the senators who've presented before me, on this desire to always come up with new authorities and new boards and new, structures at the national level, Honorable Speaker. So under Section 5, Subsection 5, you will see that there's a new authority that has been created there for disaster management. This is a big problem for me, and I always look at the composition of those authorities. I have always had a problem with them. If, Honorable Speaker, the role of disaster management is shared, you should see that reflected in even the composition of the board or the composition of the authority. But if you go to Section 9, or on the composition of the board of the authority, 5 out of the 9 members are direct national government appointees. And yet, this is a shared function. In fact, Honorable Speaker, there is only one representative from the Council of Governors. And this is an imbalance that we continue to protest as a Senate. We feel that if a function is shared, then it should reflect even in the balance of the numbers in the management of the authority. Then you go to Section 29, Honorable Chair, that attempts to classify disasters as either national or county disasters. I do not see the wisdom behind classification of a disaster, because if you look at Section 29, subsection 4, it attempts to classify a county disaster as a disaster that only affects, if it affects a single county, then that is a county disaster. Honorable Speaker, I think this is totally unnecessary. You cannot tell me, for instance, a disaster that befell the people of Maimahi, because it was confined to one county, is a disaster that should be relegated to a county disaster status. Or Solida, or in fact Hillside in Russia, or Toy Market, Westgate, or Garissa University. Those are disasters that require national attention. And I say this because if you go to then Section 30 of the proposed bill, it is only when it comes to a national disaster, something classified as a national disaster. It only in those instances can the president then declare a state of disaster in the country that then allows the release of resources, equipment, personnel, even essential goods to be able to help those people. Honorable Speaker, I think this is superfluous. There is no need for us to classify disasters. Let each disaster be judged on the basis, on a case-to-case basis. and all the resources of the country should be available to help our people, whether the disaster crosses boundaries of counties or not. Madam Speaker, the next one is on the qualifications of the people who are supposed to man the authority and even what they call the county disaster risk centers. Madam Speaker, we had a very hilarious exchange here in Nairobi with the county disaster management team. When you look at the qualifications of the people managing, say, fire in Nairobi, we had a very clear mismatch of skill and responsibility. You have people with degrees in theology. You hear is the one who's the head of fire response in Nairobi. We are not saying that people with degrees in theology are bad people. But Honorable Speaker, like the Senator for Kitui, I hear he's a bishop. But Honorable Speaker, we need people because our universities are churning out professionals in disaster management. So if you look at Section 10 of the proposed act, Honorable Chair, the chair of the board under Section 10, there is no requirement that that person be an expert in disaster management. They just require a degree in a bachelor's degree from a university recognized in Kenya. And you know that is going to be a problem if you followed the conversation that Senator Kajwang was bringing here on the quality of education and the professionals that we're putting out. Why can't we make it clear if it is disaster risk management, there are universities, there are students, there are qualified professionals in this particular field. Let them be the ones to do this. We cannot open this to everyone, including lawyers like myself, Honorable Speaker. And I know the Law Society of Kenya will come for me. But it's the truth. If you look at Section 20, subsection 1, on the qualifications for the Director General of the authority. In fact, on this one, they don't even ask for a degree. It just says he shall be competitively recruited. Honorable Chair, we're going to run into problems. If you go to Section 36, subsection 2 and 3, on the head of the County Disaster Risk Center, they just say he or she must be a person who holds a bachelor's degree from a university. I would prefer that we specify that these people must have training and knowledge in disaster management because these are courses that are offered by our universities. Then, Madam Speaker, I want to go to Section 49. Section 49, Madam Speaker, attempts to create an offense for making or circulating false alarms. Making or circulating false alarms. And I know that it might have been well intended. It might have been well intended, but this is a section that I believe is subject to abuse. Because, Honorable Speaker, we must measure between the constitutional right to free speech and trying to fetter on that particular right by introducing very dangerous provisions such as this. You might find yourself, you might not be the originator of a message on WhatsApp, for instance, that there has been a fire in Mradi. In fact, the way we knew about the fire in Mradi, most of us saw the information on social media, on WhatsApp, on our social media platforms, including Twitter and Facebook. So you can imagine you creating an offense that if somebody posted something saying there has been a fire in Mradi, and then it turns out, in fact, the section talks about if it is not in the magnitude that you have said it is, that is now going to be an offense. I believe this is a dangerous trend, and especially in this regime that looks for excuses to arrest people, this regime that looks for excuses to abduct people. This one is a very dangerous tool in the hands of Kenya Kwanza. Honorable Chair, finally I want to go to Section 53. Section 53, subsection 1, provides that the people who are working currently at the National Disaster Operations Center and the National Disaster Management Unit will be seconded to the authority for 3 years. I don't understand, and I would like somebody to explain to me why the period of 3 years, because these are people who are already working there, and that if you don't wish to join the authority for those 3 years, you can go back to your parent authority or parent institution or apply afresh to the authority for you to be employed as a worker there. That is another dangerous tool, especially in the hands of a government that we do not trust, in the hands of a government that has shown that if you are not a shareholder and you apply for a job and your name is Wafula, I am telling you, you will be told you have no shares in this government, and you will be thrown aside. So this is not a tool I would want in the hands of this Kenya Kwanza government, or indeed any other government. Let it be clear that the people working in these two institutions will transition to the authority without any hindrance whatsoever, because they have been doing this job, they should just be absorbed. Honorable Chair, with those many remarks, I don't know if I say I support or I don't, because I have problems and I've seen also positive things, and I'm hoping when it comes to the third reading, I will be proposing those amendments to deal with those issues that I have raised. I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Senator Murgor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I join my colleagues in airing my views, and I support the bill, even though I have suggestions to make, knowing that disaster management or disasters are sometimes weather-based, and therefore they may occur in an occasion or part of a year, and yet in the next may not occur. And because of that, it is different from one area to another. Some areas, as dry as West Pokot and many other places, it is very difficult to manage disaster when it happens, when it is based on water or rain. When floods take place, it is very difficult because sometimes it gets a bare ground that doesn't have trees to keep the water from catching momentum or speed, and then there is no grass on the banks of the river, and therefore a river breaks a bank and goes into homes and so on. And therefore, it is very unpredictable to know what's going to happen in this season of rain or season of drought. And then it is also regional, and therefore there needs to be a study to know that this area, like Budalang, for example, that a colleague has mentioned, it is predictable and yet not predictable, but because of the history that a place such as that one has, it is it can be the technicality that there is can prepare to prevent and to prepare the people that occupy that area or live in that area, so that it is managed according to history that a place has. And then it is also, it requires a mechanism, and some of the mechanisms require education, and therefore, in my opinion, national government's responsibility or national level should prepare the policies nationally and then devolve to county levels who will actually be the ones that will implement them because they are the ones that are with probably some of the areas that are affected by these conditions and situations according to history and also geographical settings from place to place. And then also the county should be prepared and should be given the capacity to be able to manage because they are the ones that are living with the people that are affected. Remember in West Pokot there was a landslide that affected many areas, many more than 2 divisions, and washed out homes, washed out people, and killed a lot of people. And so it was the county government that first responded before everybody else did, and therefore putting the county government in a position that should be empowered to be able to respond to such disasters when they happen. Even though there are challenges that come along with that, and one of those challenges is the speed at which government responds, either nationally or county level, because sometimes the faster the action is taken, the better, and the sooner it will help the people that are affected. But sometimes the feeling and the slowness and the slow pace at which we take will leave people being devastated and also very vulnerable because we have taken long to respond. And then some of the shortcomings include corruption. When somebody mentioned about stealing food and selling food and so on, a lot of that happens when there is disaster and there is contributions made and there is whatever blankets and food and so on, and people take that and take advantage to take those things for themselves rather than distributing and making sure that it goes to the people who deserve it. And so disaster, sometimes we create another disaster by taking the contributions that are made for the disaster. And so while we think about managing a disaster, we should learn also how to be transparent so that we manage corruption, because a lot of exchanging of hands that are not needed at that time really happen and take place, such that whatever is meant to reach a certain group of people does not reach there because of people taking advantage. And then some of the disasters happen because we have created the situation ourselves. Cutting off trees of falling trees for the purpose of burning charcoal has also brought about a lot of some of the disasters that take place. And then cutting trees along the rivers have really devastated some of the situations because when it rains, a lot of rivers flood and break banks, and without trees along the banks, it just goes out way into shambas and homes, and you can imagine, having a flooded river and bank broken and goes into homes, especially at night. The nightmare that will take place is just terrible to feel, your floor and your bed being wet because the whole area is flooded. You don't even know where to run to, because even if you get out of the house, you could be running into a deeper problem if you do not know or do not see. And so some of the effectiveness is sometimes credited to churches and NGOs and so on.
Honorable Senators, it's now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate, therefore, stands adjourned until tomorrow, 19 September, until tomorrow, Thursday, 19 September 2024 at 2:30 p.m. Senator Murgor, you have a balance of 11 minutes when this debate resumes.